All right, guys, what's going on? We are going to build a truss for my Dana44 front axle, and it is spring over axle with leaf springs. Nobody makes one like that, so I'm going to make my own. The funnest part about this, we're going to use all scrap metal. So if you've been following along, we've been working on this high steer, and we're working on hydro assist. And I came to the problem where I was going to build my ram up on a tower right here, and that was going to put this clamp for the tie rod right here where I'm having interference issues already. And that's kind of the idea behind this truss. Don't get me wrong, I wanted one anyway. And I'm going to mount the ram right above the pumpkin over there. So this is a big old chunk of 3/8 thick plate. I made it thicker right here because this is about where that cylinder ram is going to be, and I want it as close to the front as possible there. And the reason I didn't use this edge is because this way I can eliminate having all these holes that I need to fill other than that one. It was going to be 4 inches. It's 3 7/8 right now. It'll change a little bit after I cut it. But the idea is it's a little bit too short, and it's going to reach out to about right here on both sides. It'll just pass the leaf spring. And you're probably wondering, how the hell am I going to truss in my leaf springs and never be able to get them out? And I'll get to that later. This is where it's going to have to angle down to the knuckle, and I have C gussets on here already, so I'm going to build something up right off of those. And yes, I am going to have to weld it together. So welding it together isn't exactly ideal. Probably be able to bend it. I do have the swag press brake over there, but the last time I tried 3/8, it actually cracked it. So I am going to be cutting out cardboard and doing some CAD. So anyway, I guess I better get cutting. I made this part wider right here so my ram can be somewhat closer to the tie rod, especially when it's turned in. So that's pretty much centered. I can scooch it forward a little bit. I don't know if you can tell, but I cut off my stupid bump stop mount thingies. There's one of them down there. I don't know exactly which height I'm gonna go with. There's a small gap between the top of the diff and this, but not much of one. So here's the trick to this. You have to leave enough room between your spring perch and the bottom of this plate to be able to slip the end of your leaf springs through, because once you put this on there, if you weld it all the way, the only way to get your springs out if you needed to change one is to unbolt them from both ends and literally pull your spring out the hole. The other option is to finish building this out and then make a section removable from about right here to about right here that bolts down. So wherever this ends up covering up U-bolts, if I do just make it solid, it'll obviously get some decent sized holes so that I can get a socket down to those to get the nuts off, and then the U-bolts can just pull out the bottom. These will be able to slide right out the front. They'll have to be lifted up off of the spring pins a little bit, which is another reason for some of the clearance. But the idea is I want to tie into these C gussets. I was thinking up here. So I'm just gonna have to build all this crap out of cardboard, starting at these corners and then tapering down as it gets here so that it's only this wide. And it gets welded on here, and then whatever opening is left, I will build some kind of a gusset plate that kind of blocks it off and hides it all in on the front and the back. And then as far as for in here, I'll have to come up, probably build one on the front and one on the back. I almost have to weld to the cast iron with the leaves being here, and I can't just pick up the tubes right away. I mean, that's a long way to go with no welds. So I think I'm gonna have to weld these to cast. I know that some trusses kind of skip over the cast and just weld to the tube. Okay, so if I'm gonna make this pass-through system work where I build a truss over it, remove the spring out this way if I have to, the height of it has to be equal to that or greater, because that is the tallest point on the spring. It actually isn't the eye, it's this clamp down to this button. So that's roughly 2.6 inches. So what I need to do is check from the bottom of the top of the spring perch. If you look up top there, that's not even as tall as the nuts. So I was planning on putting the top of the truss like up here at where these studs are cut off. So that'll give me like way more than enough room. So that's pretty much what I did. I built a little bridge. This top piece is temporary. It's just there to kind of hold them, space them out, so they'll stand up without me having to do much to it. I'm gonna have the main piece that comes up and over the pumpkin, and I wanna bend it down across right here and then bend it back up to meet the top of this. I thought about going straight across, but it looks kind of silly. So that's roughly what it's supposed to look like anyway.
So I've been working on this truss on and off for the last 3 or 4 weeks, just in my spare time, in between doing other videos. It's been hard to get going on it just because it's difficult, and I had the concept in my head, but I couldn't figure out how to make it a reality. And the thing about this kind of stuff is you're never going to know what you can do or what you can build unless you just dive in feet first. And every project I do, I start to learn that a little bit more, to not be scared of the unknown or how am I going to do this. I just do it. And sometimes it works out great, sometimes it doesn't, but you're never going to know unless you try.
Well, it turned out pretty good, and I got to be honest with you, I love how well that thing bends metal, especially 3/8 thick stuff. I mean, it chugs a little bit. Now, I did go a little too far on this one. She's downhill a bit. I could try to heat it up and bend it back, or I could just bend this one more to match. I wanted it to be like 33 degrees, and it's like closer to 37. So the more I bend this one to match that one, it's actually going to make that even steeper. At some point here, I have to bend this to come back uphill to match my little bridge thing that I made. So I was actually able to get this squared up. I just put this in there upside down and put the blade right here and just bent it back a little bit. So I've got these marks here where I've marked off level with the edge of the table. So now I'm gonna set this under the Jeep and see about putting another bend in this. Okay, I think that's about where I want my bend, and I'm hoping to flip this back to parallel. And that little chunk is gonna be the piece that kind of makes that bridge over the leaf spring, but it's not going to be long enough. So this piece was just a wee bit short, but hey, sometimes when you're working with scrap, you just got to do what you got to do.
Probably my favorite part about this truss is that I don't have a single dollar wrapped up into the materials. The only money I had to spend was on welding consumables and stuff like that, and that just makes it that much sweeter.
So it's flush with that side, level with that. I think we just about got our backbone here. I actually wanted that a little closer to the axle tube, but it's whatever. I guess I can't eyeball it very good. No turning back now, right? I think I'm gonna trim all these down so that this sits a little lower. Just know that if you do this, you're gonna make a lot of trips back and forth, under there, back to here, back to your cardboard to find something you like. I didn't care for that first bend. I actually straightened it back out. I'm gonna plate it for strength after the fact, but I think I settled in right here, and that's gonna bring it down a little bit lower, closer to the axle tube. Back when I first finished this Jeep, I made some temporary bump stops off the top of the U-bolt plates, and this is what's left of them, and that's what we're cutting off. I've been kind of on and off of this project. I don't remember where I left off, but what I've been working on is just getting some of this industrial paint off of here, because this came out of a industrial application. So this paint is like really nasty. I don't want it cooking off and smoking when I'm welding. I don't know if you can tell, but there was more of this that went up and to go over the leaf spring on the passenger side, but there wasn't enough to make the trip anyway. And I went to change the bend a little bit and it formed a crack. So I just busted it the rest of the way off. And it's okay because it actually lines up perfect for my little riser pieces that I made, which you can see I still have to trim them. Apparently I'm not as much of a surgeon with the plasma cutter as I thought. This sits a few, maybe 2 inches off the axle tube. So this actually lines up pretty perfect with that. And then I'll be able to build a new piece to come and meet up with it. So now I need to set this in there and I need to clamp it so that it can't move, so that I can start taking my cardboard and just tracing out all the riser pieces that are going to come up from the axle and meet with it. And honestly, that's the part I have been dreading the most, because I'm not very good at eyeballing something and putting it on paper, or in this case cardboard. So it's just going to be a lot of like holding it up there, cut it, pull it back down, trim it, put it back up. So I kind of slid the whole thing more to the driver's side so that I would like how that angle matched up with the diff a little better. And it makes me wish that I had never put this bend in right here, because while I did want it to angle up, I didn't want it to be happening way over here. I wanted it to happen like right there. But I guess that's just the name of the game when you're just guessing. I decided I didn't like this last bend that was right here, so I straightened it back out. It got a little crack in it, so I went ahead and grooved it out and hot passed it on both sides. And I'm hoping it'll run right into that, roughly somewhere around in that region. I think that's where I want it to sit. Got it magneted in. Ooh, that one's a little crooked. I'll straighten that one out. Yeah, I realize the steering makes it hard to see, but that's what it looks like. So I want it as close to this as possible without hitting, so I'm actually thinking about right there is where it's gonna end up. So if you're anything like me and you've ever built something custom like this, you know it's time for me to sit down and look at it, stare at it for a while, figure out what the next step is. I still have to check my tie rod clearance, and I'm going to just put like 2 little tacks on the axle, and then I'm gonna build out all my other pieces before I do any more actual welding to this thing. So you know what that means, it's cardboard time. Womp, womp, womp. So I'm still not entirely sure how I'm going to build this bridge over the leaf spring. I've got some 3/8. I left enough room to where I should be able to put some gussets under here, like underneath of it to kind of help support it, and it should still clear the leaf spring. I don't really know. I'm kind of making this up as I go. Well, this is a really rough look at what I think I need for my riser. This part's going to be a little tricky. To the best that I can measure it from the points that I have, that's about the radius I need to where it gets too close to not matter anymore. But I think I'm going to cut this out bigger than I need and just start trimming it back, because I don't want to have to make this like 4 times. And then this is for the front side of the axle. I'm sure the rear will be a little different just because of how I have the truss tipped. There might be a little more room, but I do have a big wide sheet of 3/16 that I could cut this whole thing in one piece rather than having to use stock and then making a second piece and stitching it together right there. I'd really like to get it all on one. All right guys, drop a comment. You think this is gonna fit on the first try or not? I don't, but we'll see. Guess I was right about leaving a little much on there, so I'll have to make sure I account for that when I retrace it. Looks like I'm a little thin on the old top there, which I think I should be able to just stuff it back in there a little further. It's hitting the weld right there. Further in I stuff it, it moves up this tube and closes the gap. Okay, so I'm making some pretty good progress on this thing, but it's become quite obvious that I need to take that front axle and yank it out of the Jeep. Honestly, it's gonna be like 10 times easier to weld it that way, and even getting in here to get this paint off of it, and I'm gonna have to preheat that housing to weld to that, and I'm just gonna pull it out. I don't want to, but it is what it is. So when I torch these out with the plasma, I actually cut them a hair on the big side because it's easier to grind some away than it is to put some back. And I'm having to trim a little bit. This one's rubbing right there. And once that clears, we'll see if maybe there's anywhere else that's rubbing. I'm suspecting this edge right here is gonna rub. And this one on the back side's a little bit trickier because it's got this rib. If you look back here, there's like these fins. And actually, it looks like I got that in the right spot, but right down here on this corner, I thought that's where it needed to be, but there's like a little lump on the diff that I wasn't seeing. So I'm gonna have to cut a good chunk of this corner off. The rest of this seems to fit pretty good. I just couldn't get the bottom to swing in because of this corner. So hopefully this won't take that much longer and we'll have the most part of a truss put together. Once I get the fit up done on those, then I'm gonna start working on making this bridge over. And I don't know if you saw before, but I had square tube welded right here, and I had a bump stop pad that stuck up about right here. So I'm actually hoping to build this out and then neck it out back here about like that, and then taper down to the C-gusset, and hopefully my bump stop will just hit right off of that. This side's kind of the same deal, but I didn't have that foresight when I cut this out to leave a chunk there. But hey, that's what welders are for, right? So I'm just trying to get this rear plate in there. There's a lot of weird contours over here. I'm having to grind more off in order to get it to sink in there far enough. And actually, from standing over there, I thought I was good to go, but now that I see that I've got quite a bit of a gap there, so I gotta see what I gotta do to shove this end up. Alright, so this is just sitting here, but that's kind of the idea. I'm thinking, yes, I wanted that to be closer, but that's just as long of a piece as I had, so whatever. That should make the bridge. Now I'm going to take another piece, and this is already beveled, and I'm going to groove weld a chunk on like right here for my bump stop pad. I will put a gusset underneath of it. I've got room down here for a couple of gussets underneath of this to strengthen that up. There won't be room on that side. And then from here, I should be able to build down to the C gusset, and then I'll just wall in the front and the back, much like the pieces I made for right there. It is in a welding blanket, cooling down. I'm a little bit nervous about the cast iron because I ran out of propane on my preheat, so I just cranked up the welder and hit send mode. So hopefully it doesn't crack.
Had the welder set on caterpillar mode there. So now it's time to start building the outsides, I suppose. Well, I kind of screwed this one up. I was cutting these out so that I could get sockets on all these. And like an idiot, I kind of cut right through that one. So I'll probably never be able to get this U-bolt off without ruining it now. Earlier in the video, I talked about making this bridge part be removable. You know, you could have like a landing here with some holes and it could just bolt on here and bolt on here. And the more I think about that, I realize that you could do it a lot lower and actually just replace your U-bolt plate altogether and drill all the holes for your U-bolts in it, and then have a little shelf like down here with so you got room to put like 2 bolts on each side or whatever. And it could, as you tighten those bolts down, it would sandwich the spring also, and then you could run these through it. So then you wouldn't have to have all this goofy stuff and it wouldn't be sticking up so high. So that's definitely a thought if you're looking into building one of these. So real quick, I wanted to show you guys how I planned on mounting my hydro assist cylinder. So my idea is actually to drill a hole right there and mount it this way so that the hoses kind of go out the back and there's enough room underneath of here to get the nut. I would just have to build a spacer and then build a bracket up on top to make it double shear. So who knows, you'll have to stay tuned to the next video and see how I do it. Okay guys, I know this video has gotten kind of long. I've done some stuff off camera. I've got some more things to do on camera, reinforce here and there, a little bit of finish grinding. I never built those bump stop pads I was talking about. I do want to put a gusset right there on the driver's side between the housing and the top of the truss. And I may even drill some speed holes through the front and the back on the riser parts. Also that angle iron over the driver's side like I did on the passenger side, and there's some random stuff. I'm just not going to be able to fit it in this video or get it done on time. So what I want you to do is follow my Instagram, because I've been posting a lot of pictures on there. It's at Flawedoffroad. Sub to the channel, because the next video is going to be hydro assist, and we're going to be right back on this thing, attaching the ram to the top of it and everything. So you'll be able to see the finished product in there. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.